welcome back to Crypto Bits. I'm your host, Brittany, and today we have Dean Little joining us. Welcome to the show, Dean. How are you doing today?
Not so bad. Yourself?
I'm doing all right. I was hoping maybe we could go ahead and get started with a little bit about yourself and how you became involved with Bitcoin.
Sure. I first heard about Bitcoin probably, I'm going to say probably like 2013 or something. I'm like, this is a scam. This will never go anywhere. And I sort of ignored it up until I started seeing people like building apps and stuff. And so I got into Bitcoin development in around 2017, right before the first like major bull run, that went crazy. And I think the idea of the technology really excited me. Obviously seeing that the price could pump so much and that people could be so interested in this idea of like free market money and also like understanding more about economics. I think it just became a really attractive idea to me. So I, went into it and I was like, well, actually you can't build anything on BTC. So I had a bit of a look around, I looked at about five or six different chains and built stuff on multiple. After building a few businesses on these other chains, they always sort of ended up hitting like a scaling issue. Like if you look at EOS, it ran into the issue of all of the nodes. It was like the price of computation. I can't remember what it was a few years ago. It went through the roof and like all the dApps grinded to a halt. If you look at like Tron, which I also built some stuff on, like that's becoming more and more centralized.
Interesting.
And if you look at Ethereum, obviously gas prices.
Through the roof.
And there are other chains that are like really small cap chains that are really great, like for example IOST, but they have no price action. And so if you're building on a chain and the token's going down in price, well, like you don't really have a business. It's just like being taxed, really, in a way. So when it came to the Bitcoin Cash split, I was not really that interested because to me it was just like, oh yeah, okay, cool, we got 2 meg blocks, like whoop-de-doo. Like, there's not a single photo I've taken on my phone this year that's less than probably 5 meg that I could send to someone anywhere in the world instantly, and we're on 2 meg blocks, right? It wasn't until the idea of let's leave the block size up to the market and allow miners to sort of react to what the market requires, that I was like, that's an idea that resonates with me, right? Like letting the market decide and taking the power away from the devs and the people who would, centrally plan the chain. So I really like that idea. And so I started building on Bitcoin SV, and by far the hardest chain I've ever built on. It's in fact even harder than BTC because you could just have to deal with a 1 meg block on BTC, whereas every now and then you just get pummeled with a 2 gig block on BSV. So your infra has to be pretty up to standard there. So we joined the hackathon. At the time we were called Uptime SV. We're now called BitPing. And yeah, we won the first Bitcoin SV global hackathon, and basically just continued to work on a bunch of stuff. I've worked with, like Twitch and Matterpool and 2028 and probably like a bunch of names you've heard in the space. I've probably had, something to do with it. So yeah, that brings me to, here I am today.
Fantastic. Well, yeah, it seems like you got your hands in just about a little bit of everything. And love Twitch. BitPing, that's cool, man. Looks like you're just all over the place. That's good though. But I wanted to get your thoughts on everything going on right now in regards to like the trial and things going on with Craig Wright. The answer seems pretty obvious to a lot of people in the BSV community, but anyone who follows you might know your thoughts on the matter. But for those that don't, do you believe Craig Wright is Satoshi?
Starting off with the easy questions. I think if you're asking me, do I think he is the one and only person behind this entire thing, and he's just a super genius who did everything? No, 0% chance, no chance. But if you go back to 2015, his original claim was, "I was a part of it. There were others," right? That's the only sort of tenable claim, because there's plenty of circumstantial evidence placing him around that time, sort of at least being in the room, at least being sort of involved. Multiple influential people in Bitcoin and the crypto space have even, said as such. So, but just there's certain things like, well, for example, in a block roughly 72,000, Satoshi pushed a patch to fix an overflow error. So people were able to spend, billions of Bitcoin that didn't exist by overflowing the integer type. And Satoshi pushed a patch where he said, I'm going to check for negative values, all right, which is the problem, right? Having a signed integer, meaning it can be positive or negative, which is, in financial applications, you don't do that, because I could say, I want to send you negative $50. And what that actually means is take minus 50 from my account and put minus 50 in your account. In other words, let me steal money from you. So people don't do that in financial applications. But that's what happened on Bitcoin. Satoshi defined the minimum spendable amount as 0 Satoshis, like explicitly in that patch. And seeing Craig's reaction to the zero sat thing, saying that it was a bug in the software, like he either didn't write that code, or like, I'm sorry, like there's no chance, because Satoshi was very clear what the protocol was. And, also like things like saying SPV is about peer-to-peer. That's the absolute opposite of what SPV is about. SPV is about proving something was on chain in the past, and it doesn't really solve the double spend problem or anything like that to enable peer-to-peer transactions, because you still have to check with a miner if it's spent. So those two things are the biggest things where I'm like, someone else was involved here. But, is he Satoshi? Well, I think I'll just say I'm an empiricist, and, with only circumstantial evidence to go by, perhaps he was in the room. Who has a better claim, right? Who speaks the Queen's English, right? Who writes in the Queen's English has a better claim. Maybe there's some guy we don't know about. Maybe it's Adam Back. I don't think so. I don't think you cripple your own creation to sell to MasterCard or whatever. Like that's not compelling to me. So there's plenty of circumstantial evidence saying so, but until I see sort of something more concrete, something that's very difficult to fake or whatever, it's impossible to say for sure. But I'll just say that his original claim saying I was a part of it, there were others, is tenable, and his current claim that he's the only guy is untenable. That's my position.
So what do you think is going to be the outcome of the case?
I think it's really very much a nothing case, because you've got both sides going into it with the assumption that he's Satoshi. So there's nothing actually being proven at all, right? Now, if anything is proven, it will be that one or both parties have submitted some kind of evidence that is irrefutable, that he is Satoshi or he was part of it, right? But like let's just say you and me, let's say I'm like, yeah, I invented Ethereum, and Brittany's like, no, I was a part of it, and you owe me half of the Ethereum coins, right? And then you take me to court, and we start on this assumption, right? No one's proving that I'm Vitalik or you're Vitalik, right? Like no one's trying to actually prove that. They're trying to settle a dispute between two parties as to who the proceeds of this IP and these coins or whatever belong to. So it's not deciding whether he's Satoshi. The thing that might, point to him being Satoshi or not would be something admitted as evidence. One good thing about evidence is, there is certain standards that have to be met, and, things like, if you submit false evidence in court, you go to prison for a really long time. So, if he is faking and he does throw down something like that, he has the balls to do it. That says something, at least, I suppose. But I think I don't see the bullish case for BSV if he wins, because I feel like all right, if you win, then you're going to not use keys. Like if not using keys means I'm going to like try and tell a court to tell miners to move coins, right? Well, then obviously the precedent's going to be set on BSV, and that's going to be tumultuous for the price for anyone holding BSV. That's a very bearish scenario. And I think there's a very low chance that it would succeed on, say, BCH. That's like probably impossible. And, you know, BTC, I think there's one or two miners, you know, out there who signal they are, you know, oh, we won't mine things on this blacklist, like the, you know, like money laundering blacklists or whatever, right? Cool. There might be like a couple of miners like that, but ultimately they're not going to foot the bill for your stupid claim that you're trying to put out there when, you know, there's a very clear standard of evidence in Bitcoin to show that you own coins. And it's so standard and obvious and ubiquitous that I don't even need to tell you what that is, right? Sign. It's that simple. You know, even if you've apparently done these private signings for other people, sign for the public, right? Like that's a very easy way to, you know, it's a very easy way to at least give some kind of cryptographic validity to all of this circumstantial evidence and this crap that you've been spewing for years that everyone's kind of sick of hearing. I'm not saying keys equals identity, but gosh, it would go a long way, wouldn't it? Like, so now if he loses, well, that's very interesting because as we know, like a certain someone's been funding this whole thing from his part. And the amount of money that he would have to pay to settle would be, as far as I know, more than that guy has, which would mean that coins would have to move on BTC to pay the bill, right? And if the court order fails and he did have the keys, right? Well, like it would be kind of a forcing function, like, well, too bad, you know, your trust or whatever, you have to sign to move these Bitcoins, right? So if he loses, it would be the more bullish case. I don't see what motivation he really has to go and take, you know, however many billions of dollars and set it on fire by like market buying BSV. I think that's not something that he has to do or would do, considering he could maximize his wealth by not doing that and by just dumping slowly over time, you know, billion here, billion there.
Just a billion.
Yeah, just a billion. So yeah, I don't think this court case is a good thing. I mean, it's also not really anyone's business. I mean, it's up to him and you know, IRA, I suppose. It's not really my business to care about someone else's court case. But yeah, I'll just say that I don't think it's a good thing for BSV if he wins, and if he loses, I think it could be a good thing. It would give a lot of validity if those coins moved normally, you know.
So you're saying that if he wins, then the money might not move, but if he loses, the money's definitely going to move. So,
or at least if he wins, the money won't move on BTC or BCH. It will move on BSV first to set a precedent, and that will destroy the price. So I mean, that's just the fact of the matter, right? Like it's easier when you control the hash rate to go and say, hey, miners that I can pull the strings on, fork this chain, you know?
right.
And with the sort of dishonesty and sort of insidious things that have been slipping into the node software lately too, like it really looks like that's the play, and it's very disappointing. And I know that, you know, most of the community would not be behind that. So, you know, it's really, I don't know why they'd want to go and shoot themselves in the foot like that. There are way better ways to go about this.
Well, you know, speaking more on that, some of your viewpoints on the Bitcoin protocol have been a little controversial at times. So I wanted to ask you, do you see Bitcoin as having fundamental economic value? Why or why not?
I think, like, if you really look around you, right, today, blockchain solves almost no problems, almost none. If every blockchain died tomorrow, almost no one would talk about it except for the people holding the bags. Like no one would really notice. Like your car would still work, your electricity would still work, you know, you'd still have a house, you'd still have food. Like, so blockchains don't really yet solve any real problems for the most part. The one thing that they do solve is the Byzantine generals problem, or also the double spend problem. Like that's really the most useful thing that Bitcoin does, and especially with proof of work being like objective. It's, you know, if you read how it says it in the white paper, it's like basically it has to be the chain with the most proof of work, right? Otherwise, it's easy to fork, change, whatever, right? And the reason why proof of work is valuable is because it's an objective proof. Like I don't personally believe in the ability to like store value, because I think value is fluid. It changes all the time. If you were, you know, sitting at home today, comfortable, and someone said, "I'll give you, you know, a ton of gold," you'd be like, "Okay, great." But if you're in the middle of the Sahara Desert for 2 weeks and you haven't had a drink of water, and they say you can have a bottle of water or a ton of gold, right? The gold's not worth anything to you. You can't carry it, you can't get it home, and you're going to die of thirst, right? So I don't believe in the ability to store value. I believe in the ability to create value on demand, right? Because value is determined at the point when someone buys something. And so I think proof of work is the ultimate ability to create value on demand, right? It's the ultimate, like, I need you to secure this with proof of work. I need you to add a signal to this. I need you to produce a specific number or something that will show some authenticity, or you know, enable this game to continue to be played, or whatever. I think proof of work is that. It's generating value on demand. And I think using proof of work to solve problems is, you know, really, it makes it does away with a lot of crap. Like, you know, you see a lot of billionaires today, like most of them are billionaires because of the government, because of government enforced monopolies, whether through subsidies, tax breaks, or whatever, right? You know, you look at the success of Microsoft versus Apple, right? The US government chose Microsoft. Like, even though Apple's products are, well, in general, under jobs, were vastly superior. So, you know, there's things like that. I think when you make it really expensive to be a dick, right? Or to like do things that are like, that society in general would not agree with, by adding proof of work in front of it, you really, you get rid of sort of like rent seeking type behavior. And I think the economy flows better. So, you know, does Bitcoin directly have value? It's like, maybe, you know, I mean, value is determined by the consumer. But for me personally, I think the thing that's valuable is proof of work, and, you know, maybe to a lesser extent, the ledger. Like the ledger kind of, there is something to be said about having public databases that are auditable by anyone. I think it definitely, again, goes back to getting rid of that whole, you know, things governments do to sort of sweep things under the rug, or even like big businesses to sweep things under the rug. I think, you know, auditable ledgers kind of cool. Yeah, that can solve some problems too. So if it is valuable, that's why. But that's not why everyone's buying it.
Well, you know, BSV has been pretty stable in its price lately. Has it really gone up? Has it really gone down? I know there's so many people are willing to speculate, oh, well, we need more adopters, or we just, you know, we need more miners, we need more this, we need more devs, blah, blah, blah. But you know, I wanted to hear your thoughts on some of the things going on in the community, specifically regarding, you know, tokens, NFTs, and, you know, potentially illegal exchanges such as like T-Swap on BSV. Are they good for the development of the space, in your opinion, or are they going to hurt the development of the space?
I think the thing that might hurt the development of the space would be if people started using those things to scam or to like rug people. But I mean, so long as they're doing right by their token holders, like, you know, like they're not selling them a bill of goods and then not delivering, or saying A and giving them B. I think as long as they're honest, I think it's a great thing. I mean, I had a lot of people saying like, why the hell would you buy token swap? This is illegal. This is blah, 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 blah. And like, what are you talking about? It has no value. It's just a shit coin bubble. It's like, well, hang on. do you think like Binance produces zero value? Do you think the ability to like trade assets is not valuable? Right? Like if there is any value in that, token swap is a great idea because it's taking that same like exchange token and taking it off an exchange and making it like openly auditable for anyone. Anyone can participate. Anyone can make a coin on the Sensible protocol. Anyone can trade a pair, you know? So like, I think that's just totally ridiculous to suggest that it's a bad thing or it doesn't have value or whatever. I think the people who say that don't know what they're talking about. This word like illegal, I mean, what does that really mean? What all that means is I'm a government with guns and I get to say what trade is or isn't okay, even though you haven't harmed anyone. There's no victims. There's only, you know, people who have voluntarily exchanged with you. Like, you know, it would be like the government like going into a newlywed's house, you know, just like the night before they were married and saying, are you married yet? You're not allowed to have intercourse. You know, this is illegal, right? Even though no one was harmed, they consented, right? Like, I don't agree with the premise. And I think anyone trying to spout this stupid law narrative, you know, especially people who have a background in the gambling space, like, which a lot of these people do, right? They made their living through jurisdictional arbitrage. There will always be a jurisdiction who is more willing to give you some slack to run your project than the one you're living in. And you don't have to be limited to the jurisdiction you live in. So this idea that law is going to come in and like take all this stuff away and like get rid of it and whatever, like, yeah, it might try, but I mean, like, it won't succeed. If you look at the history of government versus the internet always wins. Like that's always been the case, you know.
Right.
So I don't think, like, I think they'll try to regulate it. They'll try to come and do this and that and whatever. And, you know, to the extent that regulation is just like, put your name on a sheet of paper so that we can find you if you do something wrong, but we'll leave you alone. I'm like, yeah, that's probably like not bad. You know, I'm against fraud. I don't like fraud. I don't like liars. But when it's like, you know, you must register with this, and like, you know, especially in the US, like the accredited investor law, where it's like you have to have, what is it, $200,000 in assets or more. It's like, oh yeah, so poor people just can't invest. Like, yeah, fuck them. They're just going to be poor for life. Like, that is immoral. And anyone telling you that is like you not conforming to that is illegal is immoral, right? And sometimes when the laws are immoral, you know, you have to decide, do I want to stand by my values, or do I want to appease these bureaucrats and keep making them richer off my hard work? And I think it's that simple.
You definitely raised some valid points there. And I think that kind of brings us into my next topic here. And I wanted to touch on transaction freezes because I know you feel very strongly about that. And in my eyes, it kind of feels like we're doubling down on this idea that, you know, like the laws and everything are going to, what's the best way to put this or phrase this? We're doubling down on the fact that we're trusting the justice system to do right by us, and that's kind of how I feel. It's like a double down on the Craig and the case and everything. So, but everybody else seems to be okay with transaction freezes. You're the only person that's all like, you know what? I don't think so.
I'm definitely not. I'm definitely not. If you talk to any of the devs in the space who are actually doing anything, they all think this is fucking terrible. All of them. All of them. It's
Have you
just
talked
that
to
the
Shatters
average...
about it?
I don't talk to that guy anymore. I gave him a lot of slack, right? And all he's done is fucking lie. So like, I'm sorry, but like, you don't listen to your community. You treat them with nothing but hostility, and then you go and fucking lie. Like, sorry. we used to be friendly, but I just don't see that. I don't see that working out, you know, unfortunately. I'd be happy to be proven wrong. But no, like, the thing is, the Bitcoin node team, they keep slipping in these like stupid features that no one wants. They don't talk to miners. They don't actually understand the problems that miners have, because they don't control any hash rate. They just tell Tal what to do, right? Tal's the one who's like going, oh, this is wrecked. Like, I can't solve this problem, right? But there's no sort of like working with other miners to actually solve their problems. So they're just going and developing random stuff. And the miners are like, we didn't need that. We needed this. But Yeah, you know, I know like certain people had nothing to do with, like, I know, like, for example, Connolly had nothing to do with the transaction freezing, but, you know, it's a real shame. But here's my thoughts. Here's my thoughts on transaction freezing. If it's a matter of, are you familiar with policy and consensus in Bitcoin Node?
A little
Yeah.
bit, yeah.
So policy is things I want personally mine, and consensus is things that we all have to accept, right? So, or what I will personally mine rather for policy. So my policy might be I won't mine something under 0.5 sats per byte, right? Your policy might be 0.25 sats per byte, but if you mine a block full of 0.25, I still have to accept it under consensus, right? If you break consensus, you fork the network. Now, in the Node software, they've put in this new feature, which is policy blacklist. And I think that's personally not a bad thing, right? Policy means I'm a miner, I'm in this jurisdiction, and my jurisdiction says, please do not mine these transactions. Or let's just say my jurisdiction, as you know, as would normally be the case, is completely incompetent, but I don't like that these transactions come from, say, a pedophile ring or something, right? And I've figured that out, and my government has no idea because they're sitting on their hands going, how do we tax people instead of actually trying to solve the world's problems? I go, you know what? I don't like pedophiles making money. I want to evict them from my mempool. I'm not going to help them move their funds, right? In that case, that's good. In fact, that is a libertarian idea. That is the idea that this is my block template. This is my property. Get out, right? And I think that's a good thing. The problem is, at the same time as shipping this, they put something else in the Node software called consensus blacklist. Okay, consensus freezing. And they purposefully omitted this from the press release, which is a very underhanded and dishonest move, quite frankly, because they were trying to slip it in and get it under the radar, you know? And that's just, it's a very evil thing to do. It's very disingenuous. It sends the wrong message if people are supposed to be trusting these people with the Node software, quite frankly.
So what is it?
Consensus freeze is, not only will I not mine this in my own block, which I'm fine with, if you mine a block with these transactions in it, I will orphan you. So what that means is, you know, you look at these companies. You look at, for example, Ali got deleted from Money Button because the insurrection was illegal, you know, like, that's totally not their place to do that, you know, to be honest. You look at, you look at these giant reorgs and they say, oh, there was an illegal attack on the network and there was like double spends. No one produced any transaction IDs. No one showed any evidence of that. They decided on a whim, this is an illegal chain and we're going to ignore the proof of work system and orphan this other chain. You know, like, I could understand Tal personally going, we don't think this chain's going to survive. We're going to mine this other one instead. And if you want to join us, you're welcome. But to send out a press release via Twitter, like, this is the actual chain now. Don't follow the proof of work. That's wrong. Like, that's, again, a very damning precedent to be setting. So when you see like these kind of actions and like top-down calls like that, and then you go to what is consensus? Well, what it really will mean is consensus is whatever we tell Tal is consensus. So if Tal doesn't like your transactions and freezes you, then if you ever try to mine those transactions or anyone else does, they get orphaned. And so either you fork the chain into a million pieces, or it's just, you know, we're all just using Tal's private database. Neither of those are a good outcome. This is a very bad idea. There is still time to delete it. I recommend that they do. See, if Bitcoin is cash, right, then it should behave like cash. If you have some cash that is the proceeds of some kind of illegal crime or whatever, right, it doesn't just magically disappear from your wallet because some bureaucrat said it was wrong or whatever, right? Like, they don't just go to the mint and say, can you unmint these coins, right? That's not a thing that cash does, right? It's up to the government to go and knock on your door and seize those funds from you physically. I don't believe that it is the job of miners to enforce any of this. I think if it is cash, then it is neutral and it is apolitical, and you don't get to do that, right? That's not how cash works. I think, we should try to preserve its use as cash because that's what it says in the white paper. I think that consensus freezing is an anti-cash idea.
So very, very powerful statements, my friend. And well, yeah, I mean, I don't want to say anything bad about anybody, but it's not a good look. I'll say that.
It's not personal. It's a matter of principle. It's not personal. It's not saying anything bad about people. It's saying these are shit ideas, right?
Well, speaking of ideas, I wanted to touch on seed phrases, get your idea about the statements made by like Electrum SV. And what is your thoughts on the seed phrases? Is it a non-issue at this point, or?
Look, there's the argument that the blockchain will continue to grow in size and the UTXO set will continue to grow in size. And so at a certain point, it will be too difficult to search the blocks for a seed phrase, right? Anyone who isn't like completely economically illiterate will look at that and go, gee, sounds like a market. Like, do you really think, like, okay, you've been in Bitcoin like a while, right? Do you really think 20 years from now, right, you booked some trip to go somewhere and you got refunded the BTC and you forgot about it and you're searching through your old emails and it's like, oh, right, yeah, I got this refund and it's now worth like $1 billion. You know what? I don't really want to recover that seed. Like, do you really think people think this way in the real world, right? Second to that, the growth of the blockchain is mostly just crap that gets pruned. It's mostly just like dog.jpg or something, and that's not me saying like, it's all weather data or whatever, like that's a bad argument. I think that there's data on the chain that is useful, but most of it is not, right? And most of it gets pruned, and putting 2 gigs of dog.jpg on the chain does not grow the UTXO set at all. So it doesn't actually add any scalability issues. But, conceivable, someday there could be some kind of level of growth where it gets harder to keep up with, but then you just like charge more money. You just go like, okay, I'm going to find all your UTXOs. Here's the biggest one. You're going to pay me this much money, right? You're going to sign this transaction, and then I'm going to give you your UTXO set, right? And like, nobody is going to go, oh, you know what? I don't want to recover my $1,000 for $1. Like, it's just that simple. It's a market, and these people, like, I don't want to try and speak bad about it, but like, this is a project that makes no money, that is relying on donations and altruism to exist, right? And that's why there's this kind of thinking behind it. If you were a capitalist, you would start a business, you would charge people money, you would make better software, and you would go, oh, people want seed phrases, I'm going to charge money. It could be $20. People will pay it. You know what I mean? Like, there is people who will buy their seed phrase recovery thing from you for $20. And look, I get it that you don't want to default to that. I get it. I understand all that. The problem is not the idea of recovery of seed phrases. The problem is altruism and refusing to create a market and then sitting back and complaining and going, oh no, if only there was some way to solve this problem. Oh, well, it sounds too hard. Let's just abandon it. Like, that's wrong attitude, completely wrong attitude.
Definitely. Well, we'll move away from that a little bit. You've made some statements about if you want to go from being a believer to a skeptic, start a mining pool. Could you elaborate on that?
Yeah, I mean, I've been a part of 2 mining pools now, and I'm friendly with all the miners except Tal, unfortunately. And then, yeah, whatever. Except, actually, you know what? Hi, Joe. Like, you're a cool man. But yeah, so I've been a part of 2 mining pools now, and basically what you see is like whenever you try to do something remotely competitive, what happens is Tal just like finds ways to screw you. I mean,
we saw that with Gorilla Pool.
Yeah, so Gorilla Pool mined a block. What's on Chain shares a mempool with Tal. They're like, acquired by Tal. What's Unchained showed Gorilla Pool's block, and 4 minutes later, Tal mined a competing block, right? And what that really shows is they're not honoring the first scene rule. They're definitely, not playing fair. And so, then you could turn that around and go, well, we should orphan them back, right? And then you do that, and then what? They say you're running an illegal chain. Let's all send out a fucking press release and all invalidate Gorilla Pool's blocks. Like, and the same thing happened with Matterpool before that. Basically, the way it works is if you have this perpetual 51% attack on the network, and they decide that they don't want the network to scale or work or be able to benefit users in certain ways, they have the ability to just keep selfishly mining and orphaning the shit out of you. And so, if there were, say, 2 or 3 miners each at like 30% or something, I would posit that it's probably not so much an issue because there's some kind of competition. But the problem is, like, Tal, if you look at their figures, they will literally mine at a loss to maintain this control, and then raise more debt, and then mine at a greater loss. Like, they are literally burning money to try and keep this thing from scaling, whether that's incompetence or some kind of strategy that's just this 25D chess play. I don't think so. But anyway, like. It's very disappointing to see the community rally behind this pool, only to have the largest miner basically try to shut them down. And quite frankly, what Tal's doing is probably illegal under Canadian monopoly laws. Really, what they're doing is they're abusing their position to stop other people from competing, and that's illegal in Canada. I'm not saying that I want to use the law or anything, but if someone out there really wants to look at it, I bet you'd have a case. So all they would have to do to solve this problem is lower the dust limit to like 1 sat and lower their relay fees to like 0.05 or something like that. And anyone could mine whatever they want, and everyone's blocks would be validated a lot faster, and all these problems would go away. But if you really look at it, like look at Crypto Fights, fantastic team, fantastic guys. I really like David Case. He's a great guy. And this shit's wrecked, man. Like, it really, I bet you it would have worked on Solana. That's a sad admission. That's a really sad admission, right? That like even Solana going down for a whole fucking day, they probably would have had better uptime on Solana than BSV. They probably would have had less issues. So like, it's sad to say, but like someone has to be real. Someone has to live in the real world and go, these are the problems we have and we need to solve them, And that's me. People hate me for it. Too bad. Like that's the sort of person I am. I'm here to solve problems.
Well, I think that's what we need a lot more of. I think, and I don't, like I said, I don't want to talk bad about anybody, so I'm not going to name anybody in particular, but there are people in the community who just more or less say yes a lot, and there are a lot of yes men's, and that's fine. It is what it is, but let's get away from that. Could you explain this next statement to me as if I were 5, okay? The statement was, what happens when miners discover better ways of demonstrating opportunity cost?
Right. Yeah, so the full quote is tokens are just proof of stake in a proof of work system, right? Like that's the previous part, I believe.
Yes.
Yeah, so the big problem, really, like Jack Lew said this the other day, right? With the right incentives, like nothing is expensive, and with the wrong incentives, everything is infinitely expensive, or something like that. It's very true. The problem with Bitcoin is a problem of incentives, right? We have got basically miners who are heavily subsidized, like in fiat, to go and chase crypto subsidies from the blockchain, from the Coinbase rewards themselves, right? Running software created by devs who, like, if the whole thing shit the bed, they'd still have a paycheck tomorrow. So they're not feeling any of the market forces. They're not feeling any of the pain that everyone actually building stuff is feeling. And so you've got this whole thing where everyone is perfectly insulated from ever feeling the forces of the market and having to react in a rational way. right? And so, yeah, it's incentives to chase incentives to chase incentives. If you took the block subsidy away from, say, BTC today, the hash rate would plummet to whatever the minimum amount of hash rate required is to create something of use without speculating on some random token, right? And so what I was sort of getting at with that statement is there are ways to demonstrate opportunity costs other than moving coins, and the biggest way to demonstrate, the most objective way to demonstrate opportunity costs, is one Daniel Krawitz might say, is proof of work, right? It's objective. I don't need a blockchain. I don't need a ledger. I don't need a coin, right? If you said you can't get into my nightclub until you solve a 10-byte hash prefix, right? I literally have to go and mine 10 bytes to get into your nightclub, and I show you the proof, and you see my nonce, which is the magic number that created this hash, and you go, okay, you've mined in, right? Instead of signing in, you mine in, right? And if you look at the way the world's going, the most important thing will actually be compute. You might think, some people might think, like, how does that help me? Well, think about like what we're doing right now. Everything's going 3D, everything's going VR, everything's going sort of more and more immersive. We've got this creepy meta thing. And we've got basically GPUs sitting there grinding away all day training artificial intelligence models to solve problems like, driving cars, handling assembly lines, delivering pizzas, like, whatever, right? And if you think of like what a robot that maybe costs like, $10 a day to run on these AI algorithms, what that's worth in terms of GDP, productivity, human hours not wasted in manual labor, right? Everything's going to kind of go that way. It's going to be like another industrial revolution, right? Compute's going to be the most valuable thing, and it's going to be hoarded by governments and big companies and stuff, right? And so what you really need is to distribute the compute, and for everyone to be able to have their own compute and have the ability to generate value on demand in order for them to be able to compete in the coming 2 decades. That's what the economy is going to look like. Your kid's gaming PC is going to be worth more than like your Bitcoins, because people are going to be like, I need to train this AI, or I need to, solve this complex problem, and GPUs are really good at that. So imagine now if you just got rid of coins and you just, instead of just moving some coin, you mined in, right? Instead of that, you have an objective proof. You don't need a ledger, because the ledger could be a trillion terabytes or something, right? Like, you don't need the ledger. You don't need any of that. If you just have this mathematical proof, right, you've generated the value, and people will go, okay, yeah, I think that's good. You can have access to this thing or whatever. And then they can take that hash you've generated, add it to their thing, and they can show other people, look how valuable my thing is, right? And it's all objective. You don't need a ledger. You don't need blocks. You don't need anything. So I think that it's possible in the future that people will add proof of work to things, and miners will go, this looks really valuable. Can I pay you for it? Or something like that. Or, I want to hold on to this data so I can profit from it in some way. You know what I mean? Like, I think that those things set better incentive models than, subsidy on subsidy on subsidy to chase a speculative valuation on something that doesn't really solve any problems.
Makes a lot of sense. No, that makes a lot of sense, actually. So in your mind, do you think we do need some type of if governments are going to control a lot of this and centralize a lot of this new technology, this new industrial age, as you were calling it, how do we protect ourselves from there being so much centralization in terms of that?
Buy GPUs and invent cool games to play with them.
No, we don't need any type of law, cyber Second Amendment, or anything like that.
The biggest gambling the biggest unregulated gambling site in the world is runescape.com. Right? Literally, right? Everything, when it comes to proof of work, there is an article that Craig published saying that proof of work by itself is not enough. It needs to have some kind of a game that you're playing. So in Bitcoin, the game is, basically like, look how big my tail is, right? I can make this many zeros, right? I'm a peacock, yay. Like, that's the game in Bitcoin, right? But the game could be whatever, right? If you make the game interesting and governments and people can't understand it because they're out of touch with, the people, as they always are, and anyone can play on a GPU, then everyone's sort of got fair access, and you don't really need to care. Like, they're not going to understand all your games. They're not going to be able to, like,
How do you think that mindset, sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off, but how do you think that'll change over time as, boomers start dying off and some of, let's just say, like, the millennial generation starts getting into positions of power? How do you think that dynamic is going to change?
A lot of people don't really like millennials. I'm very bullish on them. And there's a few reasons. Reason number one is, like, if you grew up as like a Gen Xer, you grew up writing on paper and then having to adapt to using Microsoft Word, and you kind of got a really raw deal because you got an education that doesn't prepare you for the 21st century, and you had to really work really hard to adapt to fit into this workforce. Unless you became like a laborer or something, then good on you. But if you were just a guy who, like, wrote things on paper and whatever, like, you really had to adapt to the digital age, and you were not prepared for that. And that's really unfair that the government kind of, and the education system didn't sort of adapt to sort of where the ball was going for you. If you're a sort of a Gen Z, you grew up digital native, right? The idea of books is more foreign to you than a keyboard. It's not that you don't read books, but you read it on a Kindle, you read it on a tablet or something. You grew up with, smartphones, probably from about the age of, I don't know, probably 12, 13 or something. Like, you lived through the time when the world went from this sort of blissful, everything's moving fast, technology is great, to, I think post 9/11, everything took sort of like a bad turn, and so the world was kind of thrown into political chaos, and then I think the millennials kind of grew up baptized in fire, so to speak. They look at money and the money printing, and it's like, oh, I got a stimulus check. This is fake, and like a lot of them are crypto native, right? A lot of them are crypto native. They understand, like, magic internet money and cryptography and encryption and all these things, right? They're smarter than the people who are in power by far when it comes to these technologies that are far more powerful than the political elite sort of give them credit for. I think that millennials being able to grow up in it's sort of a world where everything is constantly rugging them, everything is constantly like falling out from under them, and everything's falling apart. They have this sort of blasé attitude of like YOLO, right? Like, like fuck it, we're gonna die tomorrow. Let's just go and do the thing. And that's the sort of attitude that's required to solve problems. And sort of growing up, sort of baptized in fire like that, and being crypto native, I'm very bullish on them sort of coming up with some really interesting stuff. And I'm glad that I'm able to say that I think the next generation will do something great. Because I didn't always think that, but now I'm like, yeah, I'm pretty sure they will.
Fantastic. Well, I like your thoughts on that. I wanted to go back and touch on something that we were talking about a second ago. But what are your thoughts on Mark Wilcox talking about building a proof of stake system on top of or inside of Bitcoin?
I think Bitcoin is a proof of stake system by his definition of what that would be, because like Mark Wilcox is about proof of work. I don't think he's if he says proof of stake, he's probably joking. Like, I've been to his office. You walk in the door, and the first thing you hear is like the fans just like spinning up on this giant GPU processing thing. And every single computer in his office has got these like RGB fans and like beautiful graphics cards, and it's all like gaming PCs and stuff. So I think he's probably joking. I think, Mark is very much about the idea that I sort of put out before about like, proof of work being objective and the ledger not being all that important and the tokens not being all that important. I think if anything, he would call Bitcoin kind of a proof of stake system because of the token aspect being basically subsidy mining.
Yeah. Yeah, makes sense. Well, I wanted to touch on Solana too, because you touched on Solana a couple minutes ago, and
Sure.
kind of got away from that a little bit. But basically, how does proof of work compare to Solana's proof of history?
Yeah, I mean, proof of history is kind of good in a way because it kind of incentivizes people to keep the data around. And the other thing too is it adds like a provable delay function. So like let's say you added something like this to Bitcoin today, right? Let's say that for 10 minutes of the block producing time, you didn't spin up any ASICs, right? And then at the last minute, right, we all decided on the network, any block containing this transaction onwards will now be considered valid. And then it's just like flat out, balls to the wall, let's mine the shit out of this block for a minute, right? You could basically cut the difficulty by 90%. You wouldn't actually sacrifice any of the security, right? And basically, like, if you solve the problem of a distributed timestamp, right, which I believe Solana has, or has at least made like a really great inroads to getting there, then you can basically delay the hashing part to like right at the end, and you could reduce your electricity costs, your emissions, and all that stuff by 90%. But you'd still need to have the greatest number of ASICs to reach those difficulty targets, right? So the number of like the cost of running a mining pool in terms of the hardware outlay doesn't change, but the electricity costs and the impact on the environment goes through the floor. And it's a much more efficient way to do it. And now, let's say that instead of it being 1 minute mining time, you made it a 5-second mining time, if you could coordinate all the nodes in the world to do that, right? And then not only do you make it like, 99% more efficient in a way, you could then go and run 1,000 chains this way for the current amount of electricity securing, say, BTC. So I'm not necessarily saying that's the best idea or whatever, because I do like proof of work. And right now Bitcoin just relies on proof of work as the distributed timestamp system, and I think that's a pretty elegant solution. But I don't think that it's like the only way that you could solve that problem. And I think the way Solana does this, right, is very interesting, because although it's kind of a form of proof of stake, the ability to actually mine a block and process the transactions at scale, you're going to need a lot of GPUs to handle this problem. And so really the proof of stake part kind of becomes more like a high frequency trading for proof of work sort of system, where it's like only people who can produce good blocks will be elected. And to produce good blocks, you have a huge hardware outlay, and that's something that can't be gamed. So my thoughts are it's not as bad as, say, like EOS or something, or like Tron or systems like that. I think yeah, definitely because like for proof of history to work, right, everyone needs to have the transactions available to them to be able to validate blocks. And when the transactions go let's say they're doing, I don't know, theoretically now one GPU could do 8 million signature validations per second, right? And they've shown very high throughput on mainnet. So let's say it's 8 million. If you're doing 8 million transactions per second, right, you have to have some serious hardware to make that happen. And so it's really no different from mining or proof of work in my opinion. Yeah, so
well, how do you think that compares to BSV, when BSV is unbounded and Solana has theoretical top end limits? I believe, if I read it correctly, their theoretical limit was 700,000 TPS, some absurd number.
I don't think that it even has a theoretical limit. I think that all these problems are solved. And I think if you look at the team on Solana, they've done more with less money in like, what, 8-9 months than the BSV node team has done in 4 years. And, you know, I get it. There's a lot of technical debt and stuff, but this is a team dedicated to scaling. They have got some of the best people in the world. Anatoly is a very smart guy who really understands this problem. And, you know, I'm, put it this way. I was skeptical. I said to Jack Liu about a year ago or a year and a half ago, I'm like, this thing will never go over $1. Like, that's what I said to Jack Liu. I said, the Ethereum meme is too strong, you know? I'm very skeptical of all of these technologies. And what I see with Solana is something that has a lot of potential. It has a lot of really good people working on it. Like the only red flag I really see, I suppose, is maybe the allocation of the tokens to the investors is really high. So that could be, you know, they could really dump on the market. But, you know, if they held for 10 years, like you wouldn't feel it, you know? And
well, what about recently when they didn't, what was it? They didn't produce a block or something like that. It was like something happened recently.
yeah, the network crashed on mainnet for about a day. That to me is bullish, right? When was the last time that like BSV tried to hit some absurd amount of transactions per second and went down? Like that would show that we actually have an appetite for scaling, right? And the counterpoint to that is, let's be really scared and like never move fast or break things. Like, dude, come on, like Venmo's
But
gone
what about
down.
Terranode? I mean, they've done the demonstrations about Terranode.
That is not exciting to me at all. You've taken Bitcoin J, put it in fucking Kubernetes and spun up like a couple of instances of that. That's 4 years of work. Are you joking? Like, sorry, no. Like this shit needs to be written properly. It needs to be written properly. If Solana on a single node can do 50,000 transactions per second and you need 4 nodes to do that on Bitcoin, your infrastructure costs of running that are going to be astronomical. Okay. Like, and that's not something that is going to mix well with BSV already being quite often unprofitable to mine unless you are the lead miner who can pump out these 2 gig blocks without being orphaned. If you are that miner, good for you. If you're anyone else, no chance, right? So again, it does come down to incentives there as to why I don't think that that's going to work. I think what you really need is for the node to be very efficient. You know, I've made a Game Boy mine Bitcoin, you know, and I think that was a good exercise in how can we optimize this stuff to work on the most minimal amount of resources, right? I think people who don't think that way are not going to be able to scale a chain, right? It's like you very much have to understand the small to be able to understand the big. And I'm not particularly confident in the current direction of everything. It does not look good, but these are all solvable problems, and there are people with an appetite to solve them, myself included. And so, you know, I think, quite frankly, I don't think Solana has a theoretical limitation. I don't think, you know, BSV is unbounded either. I think Bitcoin, you could say, is unbounded, but BSV certainly isn't, if you understand what I'm saying there. But be like, all these things can be solved. All these things, like people like to draw dragons on maps so they don't sail to the new world. You know, it's like, that's a shitty mindset. Don't go, this has got some theoretical limitations, therefore it can't work. You know, make it work. Think of a better idea, you know? That's what it's all about.
Not accepting the narrative, going against the grain, and figuring out ways to go around things and make things work. Seems to be your mantra.
I mean, you look at that Solana thing. They pumped it full of transactions. It went down. The entire community rallied around this entire team together, right? All of the validators, all of the devs, everybody rallied together to get it back online to like unfuck this really complicated distributed problem, right? Everyone jumped on, all hands on deck. The Discord was on fire. Everyone was like going off, right? Like trying to solve this problem. That to me is a very healthy thing. That shows that there is just so much support and so many people who care about its success. And the fact that they got it online again so quickly, you know, Bitcoin has gone down multiple times in its history, early in its first year or two. Solana is early. The mainnet is a beta. It's not mainnet 1.0, it's mainnet beta, right? Things will break. And I applaud them for having the vision to aim this high. Because if BSV had even 1% of that vision, like even 1% of that appetite, you look at Arweave. Solana uses Arweave to store data, right? Arweave stores terabytes of data per month. There should be no reason for Arweave to exist if anything we put on our stupid marketing materials actually was true, okay? If we actually had an appetite for scale, Arweave would not exist. It would all be on BSV. So that's not a criticism of people. That's just a statement. This is the reality. We need to really reconsider what we're doing here and put it in a more positive direction.
Wow. Well, those are definitely some powerful statements, my friend. And I don't disagree with you at all. I mean, Solana's a great project. I don't mean to be, critical of it or anything. I do think it's a good project. But anything that you're looking forward to right now? Anything you're looking forward to coming up soon? Anything with BitPing or just in general?
BitPing's got some really interesting releases on the near horizon. So look out for that. Some people will like them. And then, I'm also really excited for Twitch 3. I've been doing some work on that, along with everything else I've been doing, and that's really good. Looking forward to putting the lawsuit behind us and like focusing on actually scaling the chain. That would be good. And just in general, I'm pretty excited around sort of like the token swap stuff and just sort of the innovation that I'm seeing there. I think
there's still a lot of positive things happening on BSV despite it all.
Yeah, no, that's exactly right. I mean, if it succeeds, it will be in spite of all this garbage, not because of it. And I think if we could just drop that and take a sort of a more cooperative approach to things, I mean, we'd get there a lot quicker. We'd be a lot further ahead right now. So I really hope that me saying this is not interpreted as a personal attack, but that people will look at it and go, you know what, he's right. Like, let's change some things. Let's make some changes and set it on a better direction.
Work together.
Yeah, exactly. That's what it's about. It's about creating a better world, recreating the world in the image of your highest values. That's what it's all about. So.
Yeah, I think I was talking to one of my friends the other day, and he said it very eloquently. He said more or less around the lines of BSV might fail, but if it doesn't, it'll be unlike anything else the world has ever seen. And I was like, that's a fair statement. That's a fair statement. I don't know, but we'll definitely see. But is there anything else that you wanted to add? Anything that we didn't that you wanted to touch on that I didn't ask or anything like that?
No, I think we're good.
All right. Well, I do appreciate you coming on the show and hanging out and getting to chat with me for a little bit. But that is going to wrap it up for us today, guys. Make sure you slam the like button and hit the subscribe, and we'll see you next time. Bye-bye.